The glass trembled in my grip, not because my hands were shaking, though God knows they had reason to, but because the tray was too heavy, loaded with crystal tumblers filled with amber liquid that cost more than my monthly rent. The weight pulled at my shoulders, made my lower back scream in protest after 9 hours on my feet. But I kept my chin up, my expression blank, my steps measured across the marble floor of Aurelius, the kind of restaurant where silence itself felt expensive. I was invisible here. That was the point. Girls like me, 23, drowning in student debt, living in a 5th-floor walk-up with a shower that only worked on Tuesdays. We were ghosts drifting between tables of people who'd forgotten what it meant to worry about money. We refilled glasses, cleared plates, smiled without teeth, and dissolved into the wallpaper the moment we turned away. Tonight was no different, or so I thought. The private dining room at the back had been reserved for weeks. Management told us nothing except that we'd rotate in pairs, that we'd speak only when spoken to, and that we'd sure as hell better not mess this up. I'd drawn the short straw with Elena, who shot me a look of pure sympathy as we pushed through the double doors balancing trays of Macallan 25 and Glenlivet 18. The room swallowed sound. Leather, mahogany, and something darker. Cologne mixed with gun oil, maybe, or just the particular musk of men who'd never heard the word no and meant it. There were 8 of them scattered around the long table, all in variations of black suits and cold expressions, but my eyes went to him immediately, the way a compass finds north. He sat at the head of the table. I'd never believed in presence before. Not really. It seemed like something romance novels made up, that magnetic pull that defied logic. But standing there with my tray cutting into my palms, I understood. He didn't need to move or speak. The air simply bent around him, grew heavier, became aware of itself. Dark hair swept back from a face all sharp angles and brutal beauty. A jaw that could cut glass, eyes the color of slate in winter, gray with veins of something colder running through them. He wore his suit like armor, black on black on black, with a watch at his wrist that probably cost more than my entire bloodline had earned in 3 generations. And he was looking at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. Like I was something more than furniture with a pulse. My breath caught. I forced it down, dropped my gaze to the tray, and moved to set down the glasses with Elena's practiced efficiency. The men barely glanced at us as we worked. Their conversation a low rumble of Italian and English, bits about shipments and territories and names I didn't recognize and definitely didn't want to. Macallan, neat, one of them said. A man built like a brick wall with a scar bisecting his eyebrow. He didn't look at me when he spoke, just jerked his chin toward an empty spot on the table. I moved to comply, hyper-aware that those winter-gray eyes were still tracking me. My hand stayed steady as I placed the glass down, but my pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. Then I saw it. The liquid in one of the glasses, his glass, the one at the head of the table, shifted. Not a dramatic change, nothing anyone else would notice. But I'd been doing this job for 2 years, had served enough whiskey to know what Macallan 25 looked like in crystal under low light. This wasn't quite right. The color was off by maybe half a shade, the viscosity slightly thinner. And there, caught in the amber, was that sediment? My stomach dropped. I'd set down 3 glasses already. His was the 4th. Elena had moved to the other side of the table. No one was paying attention to me except him. Those gray eyes held mine for a fraction of a second, and I saw something in them, a test maybe, or a dare. He reached for the glass. Wait. The word left my mouth before I could stop it. Before I could think about what I was doing or who I was interrupting, or the fact that every single man in this room had just gone absolutely still. His hand paused, hovering over the glass. One eyebrow arched in question. My throat closed. The silence pressed down like a physical weight, and I could feel Elena's panic radiating from across the room, could sense the way the other men's attention had sharpened into something dangerous. I swallowed hard, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. I'm sorry, sir, but I think there might be something wrong with that glass. The color isn't right. Time stopped. No one moved. No one breathed. The man with the scar reached for something under his jacket, and I realized with dawning horror that I'd just accused someone, maybe the staff, maybe one of these men, maybe the bartender, of tampering with a drink in a room full of people who probably killed for less. But he, the man at the head of the table, he just studied me. His gaze moved from my face to the glass, then back again. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted it to the light. "Interesting," he said, and his voice was like smoke over gravel, a sound that slid under my skin and stayed there. He set the glass down untouched and leaned back in his chair, those winter eyes never leaving mine. "What's your name?" "Nora." It came out as a whisper. "Nora Chen. Nora Chen." He repeated it like he was tasting each syllable, deciding whether to keep it or spit it out. "You have good eyes." One of the other men, younger, with slicked back hair and a nervous energy, reached for the glass. "Boss, let me, Marco." The word cracked like a whip, and the younger man froze. "Call Victor." Marco pulled out a phone with shaking hands. The man at the head of the table, the boss apparently, gestured to someone I couldn't see, and suddenly there were more people in the room. A man in a white shirt materialized, took the glass with latex-gloved hands, and disappeared. Through it all, he watched me. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, voice soft, almost conversational. I shook my head. My tongue felt thick, useless. "Good." A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone in a heartbeat. "That means you're either very brave or very stupid to speak up just now." He tilted his head. "Which is it, Nora Chen?" "I don't know," I admitted, because what else could I say? He laughed, a low, dark sound that made my spine straighten. Honest, I liked that. He stood, and suddenly the room felt smaller. He was tall, broad-shouldered, built like violence wrapped in expensive fabric. "Everyone out!" The command sent the other men scrambling. Elena shot me a terrified look as she fled, taking her tray and leaving mine behind. In 30 seconds, the room was empty except for him, me, and 2 men who positioned themselves at the doors like living walls. My heart hammered against my ribs. He circled the table slowly, each step measured and predatory. When he reached me, he stopped just close enough that I could smell him. Cedar and bergamot, and something darker underneath. Gunpowder, maybe, or just danger distilled into scent. "You just saved my life," he said quietly. "Do you understand that?" I didn't trust my voice, so I nodded. "That means I owe you a debt." His hand came up, and I flinched before I could stop myself. But he only brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers cold against my overheated skin. "And I always pay my debts. What do you want, Nora? Money? A new job? Protection?" I just want to go home." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Please. I just want to finish my shift and go home." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment. His hand dropped. "You're dismissed, but this isn't over." He pulled a card from his jacket, pressed it into my palm. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, embossed with a single phone number and nothing else. "You'll hear from me." It wasn't a question. I stumbled backward, clutching the card, and practically ran from the room. My tray clattered forgotten on a side table. I didn't stop until I'd reached the staff room, where Elena grabbed me by the shoulders with wide, terrified eyes. "Oh my God, Nora, what the hell did you just do? Do you have any idea who that was?" "No," I whispered, staring at the card in my hand. "Who?" "Damien Volkov." She said the name like a curse. "He runs half the city. The other half wishes he did. They say he's—" She cut herself off, glancing around the empty room. "You don't talk about Damien Volkov. You just pray you never have to meet him." I looked down at the card, at the number that seemed to burn through the paper into my skin. Too late for prayers. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. Those winter gray eyes dissecting me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. The card sat on my nightstand, face down, as if that would somehow diminish its weight. But I felt it there in the darkness, a presence as tangible as the man who'd given it to me. By morning, I'd convinced myself it meant nothing. Men like Damian Volkov didn't follow up on waitresses who'd stumbled into saving their lives. He'd probably forgotten me the moment I left the room. The card was a courtesy, nothing more. A rich man's version of a thank you note. I almost believed it. Work called at 9. I was scheduled for the lunch shift. But Marcus, the manager, a thin man with perpetually worried eyes, told me to come in immediately. His voice had that stretched quality that meant trouble, the kind that made my stomach clench even before he explained why. "There's been a situation," he said when I arrived, pulling me into his cramped office that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. "The owner wants to see you, Mr. Castellano." I'd never met the owner. In 2 years of working at Aurelius, he'd been nothing but a name on my paychecks, a ghost who existed somewhere in the upper echelons I'd never reach. No. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. The new owner. The floor dropped out from under me. "What do you mean, new owner?" As of 7 o'clock this morning, Aurelius changed hands. He pushed his glasses up his nose with a trembling finger. Mr. Castellano received an offer he couldn't refuse. The new owner wants to meet all senior staff, and specifically, he swallowed hard. Specifically, he asked for you. I knew before he said the name. Of course I knew. Damian Volkov purchased the restaurant. Marcus finished, and he looked at me like I was already dead. He's waiting in the private dining room, the same one from last night. Now my legs moved without permission, carrying me through the kitchen where the morning prep crew worked in unusual silence, their eyes sliding away from mine like I was contagious. The double doors loomed ahead, and I remembered pushing through them just 12 hours ago, remembered thinking I was invisible. I'd never be invisible again. He stood at the window when I entered, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the street below. Morning light caught in his dark hair, turned his profile into something carved from marble. He'd traded last night's all-black ensemble for charcoal gray, but the effect was the same, power wrapped in thread count I couldn't comprehend. The 2 guards from last night flanked the door. One was the brick wall with the scarred eyebrow. The other was new. Lean and sharp-eyed, with the coiled readiness of the attack dog waiting for a command. Nora Chen. He didn't turn around. 23 years old. 3rd-year medical student at St. Augustine's, currently on leave due to... He paused, and I heard paper rustling. Financial difficulties. Student debt totaling $173,000. You work 3 jobs. Here, a clinic in Riverside, and weekend shifts at Morrison Memorial's emergency room. You live alone. No family in the city. Your mother died when you were 19. Cancer. Your father. Another pause. Heavier this time. Your father is currently serving 15 years at Redford Correctional for fraud and embezzlement. Each word landed like a blow. He recited my life, my private, painful life, with the casual precision of someone reading a grocery list. When he finally turned to face me, his expression was unreadable. You're very alone, Nora, and very vulnerable. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to bolt for the door, to disappear into the morning crowds and never look back. But the guards would stop me before I took 3 steps, and besides, my legs had forgotten how to move. Why? My voice came out stronger than I felt. Why did you buy the restaurant? Because you work here. He said it like it was obvious, like purchasing an entire establishment to maintain proximity to one waitress was perfectly reasonable. Because you saved my life, and I told you I always pay my debts. I don't want anything from you, no. He moved closer, each step deliberate. You don't want to finish medical school? Don't want to stop working yourself into an early grave? Don't want to sleep in a bed that isn't surrounded by mold and broken heating? He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. You don't want to stop being invisible? I like being invisible, I whispered. Liar. The word was soft, almost gentle. You're exhausted, Nora. I can see it in the shadows under your eyes. In the way you hold yourself, like you're always bracing for the next disaster. You're drowning. And you've been drowning for so long you've forgotten what it feels like to breathe. My throat tightened. I refused to let him see how close to the truth he'd come. What do you want from me? Your time? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, handed it to me. Open it. My hands shook as I did. Inside was a contract, pages of legal language I couldn't process, but certain phrases jumped out. Exclusive personal assistant, 6-month term, salary of $15,000 per month, discretion required, immediate debt forgiveness upon signing. I don't understand. It's simple. He leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching me with that unsettling intensity. You work for me. 6 months. I need someone I can trust. Someone who sees details others miss. Someone who isn't already bought and paid for by my enemies. Last night, you proved you're all three. I'm a medical student, not a whatever it is you need. You're on leave from medical school because you can't afford it, he corrected. This solves that problem. 6 months with me, and you walk away with enough money to finish your degree debt-free. You'll have housing, security, and my protection. His eyes hardened. The man who poisoned my drink last night. He's been dealt with. But he wasn't working alone. There are people in this city who want me dead, Nora, and they'll use anyone close to me to make it happen. If you walk out of here, if you go back to your normal life, they'll find out you saved me, and they'll come for you. Ice flooded my veins. You're threatening me. I'm being honest with you. He pushed off the table, closed the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You entered my world last night whether you meant to or not. Now you have 2 choices. Work for me under my protection or take your chances out there alone. He gestured toward the window, toward the city that suddenly felt less like home and more like a hunting ground. Which sounds safer to you? I looked down at the contract, at the numbers that represented more money than I'd seen in my entire life. At the clause about debt forgiveness that would free me from the crushing weight I'd carried since my mother's medical bills had buried us, at the promise of 6 months that felt simultaneously like salvation and damnation. What would I have to do? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Stay close. Attend meetings. Use those sharp eyes of yours to watch for anything, anyone, out of place. Learn my world so you can help me navigate it safely. He tilted his head. And occasionally, serve drinks at private dinners where I need someone I trust handling what I consume. I'm not qualified for this. You're more qualified than anyone else I could hire. His hand came up, and this time I didn't flinch when his fingers brushed my jaw, tilting my face toward the light. You noticed what a room full of trained killers missed. That's not luck, Nora. That's instinct. That's survival. And I value survival above almost everything else. Almost. The word hung between us, pregnant with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I need time to think. You have until noon. He dropped his hand, stepped back. Marco will drive you home. Pack what you need. If you sign, you move into secure housing today. If you don't. He shrugged, but there was nothing casual about it. Try to disappear. Though I should warn you, I'm very good at finding people who try to hide from me. The guards opened the doors without him signaling. Marco, the nervous young man from last night, appeared in the hallway, looking marginally less terrified in daylight, but still carrying that twitchy energy of someone perpetually expecting disaster. Take Miss Chen home, Damien ordered. Make sure she arrives safely. Wait for her decision. I clutched the folder to my chest like armor and walked toward the door on legs that felt disconnected from my body. In the threshold, I paused, looked back. He'd returned to the window, hands clasped behind his back, silhouette dark against the morning light. He looked lonely standing there, a king in an empty castle, surrounded by walls he'd built himself. Why me? I asked. Really? You could have anyone. Why someone like me? He didn't turn around, but I saw his shoulders tense because everyone else wants something from me, he said quietly. Power, money, connection, fear, but you, Nora Chen, you just wanted to go home. That kind of honesty is rarer than you know, and far more valuable. The car was a black Mercedes with windows tinted so dark I couldn't see out. Marco drove in silence, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror like he expected someone to follow us. Maybe someone was. In the span of 12 hours, my understanding of reality had shifted so completely that surveillance seemed almost quaint. My apartment looked shabbier than usual when we pulled up. Peeling paint, cracked steps, a front door that didn't quite close properly. Marco insisted on walking me up, his hand resting on something under his jacket that I tried very hard not to think about. "You should sign," he said, as I unlocked my door. "The boss doesn't make offers like this. If he's willing to protect you, you're safer with him than anywhere else in this city, even though being near him makes me a target. You're already a target." His young face was grave. "At least with him, you've got a chance." He left me there, and I heard him take up position outside my door. A guard or a jailer, maybe both. I sat on my sagging couch and spread the contract across my coffee table, reading it properly this time. The terms were generous to the point of absurdity. $15,000 a month, full medical coverage, housing in a secure building, a clause about hazard pay that made my blood run cold because it acknowledged, in legal language, that my life would be in danger. But there was also a section about education, a provision that I could continue my studies remotely, that he'd provide tutors if needed, that the 6 months wouldn't derail my medical career, but enhance it through exposure to trauma care and high-pressure decision-making. He'd thought of everything, or he'd had lawyers think of everything, which amounted to the same thing. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You have 3 hours left. The car will return at noon. DV." I stared at those initials, at the presumption that I'd know exactly who they belonged to. At the casual display of power. He'd gotten my number without asking, probably had known it before I'd even woken up this morning. I thought about my mother, about the way cancer had hollowed her out from the inside while we'd sold everything we owned to buy her a few more months, about my father, who'd stolen from his company in a desperate bid to cover her medical costs and ended up in prison for it, about the debt that had swallowed my dreams and left me treading water in a life I'd never wanted. I thought about being invisible, about the safety of obscurity. And I thought about winter gray eyes that saw me, really saw me, when everyone else looked through me like I was made of glass. At 11:45, I packed a bag. Not much. Some clothes, my textbooks, a photo of my mother. Everything I owned fit into one duffel and a backpack, the truth of my life, reduced to luggage light enough to carry. The contract sat on the table, unsigned. My pen hovered over the signature line. What would happen if I refused? Would he really let me go? Or was that just another illusion of choice? And if I signed, if I willingly walked into his world, would I ever find my way back out? The knock came at exactly noon. Marco stood in the hallway, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Chen, have you made your decision?" I looked at the pen in my hand, at the contract that promised safety wrapped in danger, at the door that led back to a life of exhaustion and slow drowning. Then I signed my name, Nora Chen, in handwriting that didn't shake even though my hands wanted to, and handed him the folder. "Take me to him," I said. Marco smiled, and it wasn't entirely reassuring. "He'll be pleased," he said. The boss doesn't like waiting. Neither did I thought, as I shouldered my bag and followed him down the stairs. But something told me I'd be doing a lot of waiting in the months ahead, waiting to see if this was salvation, or the biggest mistake of my life. Waiting to understand what Damien Volkov really wanted from me. Waiting for the moment when his protection became a cage I couldn't escape. The Mercedes was waiting at the curb, engine purring like a predator. Through the tinted window I thought I saw a shadow move. Him, maybe, or just my imagination painting threats in empty spaces. I climbed inside. The door closed with a heavy, final sound. And just like that, Nora Chen, the invisible waitress, ceased to exist. The apartment, no, penthouse, made my entire former life look like a joke. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city from the 42nd floor, turning the streets below into arteries of light. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive fabric, the kind that probably cost more to clean than I used to make in a month. Everything was white and chrome and glass. Sterile as an operating room, but somehow warmer, softer. A cage didn't have to look like a cage to function as one. "Your room is through there," Marco said, gesturing to a hallway. "Boss says to get settled. He'll be here at 7 for dinner. Here." My voice cracked. "He's coming here?" "This is his building, his penthouse." Marco's expression was carefully blank. "You didn't think he'd put you somewhere he couldn't monitor, did you?" "Of course not." I'd signed away 6 months of my life to a man who'd bought an entire restaurant just to keep me close. Privacy was probably the first thing I'd sacrificed, even if I hadn't understood it at the time. The bedroom was larger than my old apartment. A king bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that looked like they'd never been touched. The closet was a walk-in the size of my former living room, already half filled with clothes I definitely hadn't packed. Dresses, slacks, blouses, all in my size, all in colors that ranged from black to darker black with occasional detours into charcoal gray. His aesthetic, I realized. He was dressing me in his world's uniform. A garment bag hung separate from the rest. A note pinned to it in heavy masculine handwriting. For tonight. DV. I unzipped it slowly. Inside was a dress that made my breath catch. Midnight blue silk that shimmered almost black in certain light, with a neckline that was modest but elegant, sleeves that would end just above my elbows. Sophisticated. Expensive. The kind of thing I'd never have chosen for myself but somehow knew would fit perfectly. He'd thought of everything. Again. I showered in a bathroom with heated floors, and a shower head that felt like standing under warm rain, then dried off with towels so soft they seemed to apologize for touching my skin. The dress slid on like water, and I was right. It fit as though tailored specifically for my body, which it probably had been. 7 o'clock arrived with the precision of an execution. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, another security measure, I guessed. And Damien Volkov stepped out like he was walking onto a stage. He'd changed too, now in all black again, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms roped with muscle and a tattoo I couldn't quite make out in the low light. Those winter gray eyes found me immediately, and something shifted in them. Approval, maybe, or possession. "Beautiful," he said, his voice that same smoke over gravel that made my spine straighten involuntarily. "You wear it well. You bought me a wardrobe." I tried to keep the accusation out of my tone and failed. "I bought you a uniform." He moved past me toward the dining area, where I noticed for the first time that the table was set for 2, food already laid out in covered dishes that smelled like heaven. In my world, appearance is armor. You'll learn to weaponize it. He pulled out a chair, waited. It took me a moment to realize he was waiting for me. I sat, and he pushed the chair in with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. When he took his own seat across from me, he moved with that same predatory grace I'd noticed at the restaurant, every gesture controlled, nothing wasted. "Ground rules," he said, lifting the covers off the dishes to reveal what looked like a 5-course meal prepared by someone who understood that food could be art. "First, in private, you call me Damien. In public, sir, or Mr. Volkov, depending on context. Second, you don't lie to me. Ever. I'll know, and I'll be very disappointed. What happens when you're disappointed? A slight smile. Let's not find out. Third, you go nowhere without Marco or another guard I've personally vetted. Nowhere, Nora. Not the corner store, not the lobby, nowhere. Fourth," he paused, served food onto my plate with surprising domesticity. "You tell me immediately if you feel unsafe, uncomfortable, or if anything seems wrong. Your instinct saved my life once. I'm trusting them to do it again. And what are your rules?" I asked, picking up my fork with hands that wanted to shake. "What do I need to know about you?" He considered this, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "I don't sleep much. You'll find me working at odd hours. Don't be alarmed. I'm not patient with incompetence, but I'm generous with loyalty. I have enemies who would hurt you to hurt me, which is why you'll never be alone. And..." His eyes met mine, held. "I don't share what's mine." The possessiveness in that statement should have terrified me. Instead, it sent heat curling low in my stomach, a reaction I absolutely did not want to examine. "I'm not yours," I said quietly. "I work for you." "That's different." "Is it?" He took a sip of wine, his gaze never leaving my face. "You signed a contract that puts you under my protection, in my home, wearing clothes I provided. You'll go where I go, see what I see, be introduced as my..." He paused. "What would you prefer?" Assistant seems cold. Companion implies things that may not be accurate. Yet. That word again, loaded with implications. Assistant is fine. I managed. Liar. But he smiled when he said it, a real smile that transformed his face from brutally beautiful to something almost approachable. Almost. Eat, Nora. You're too thin. When's the last time you had a proper meal? I couldn't remember. Between work and school and exhaustion, food had become fuel I consumed standing up, usually whatever was cheapest. This, sitting at a table, eating food that actually tasted like something, having a conversation with someone who wasn't asking me for refills or test results, felt surreal. We ate in companionable silence for a while. He watched me with that unsettling intensity, like he was cataloging every micro-expression, every tell, learning me the way you'd learn a new language. Why medicine? He asked eventually. Why put yourself through that much school, that much debt? My mother. The words came easier than I expected. Watching her die, watching doctors do everything they could, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to be the person who made it enough, who saved people. I met his eyes. I wanted to matter. You matter now. As what? Your canary in a coal mine? Your poison tester? As someone I trust. He set down his fork, leaned back in his chair. Do you know how rare that is, Nora? Trust in my world? Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. But you just wanted to go home. You saw poison and spoke up even though it endangered you. That's not calculation. That's character. Or stupidity, I muttered. I prefer brave. He stood, moved to the windows, hands in his pockets as he stared out at the city. My father used to say that trust was weakness, that caring about anyone made you vulnerable. He built an empire on fear and died alone, shot by one of his own men who thought they could take his place. He turned to face me, backlit by city lights. I don't want to die alone, Nora. And I don't want to build a life where everyone around me is counting the days until they can put a bullet in my head. The vulnerability in that admission stole my breath. Here was Damian Volkov, a man who apparently ran half the city through violence and intimidation, telling me he was lonely, that he was tired of being surrounded by people who would kill him for the right price. So I'm what? Your experiment in trust? You're my hope that not everyone is corrupt. He moved back to the table, but this time he didn't sit. Instead, he stood behind my chair, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. 6 months, Nora. Give me 6 months of your loyalty, your honesty, your sharp eyes and sharper instincts. In return, I'll give you freedom from debt, security, and the knowledge that you helped keep someone alive who might not deserve it, but is trying to. His hand settled on my shoulder, warm and heavy, not threatening, anchoring. Can you do that? I thought about the contract sitting in Marco's possession, about the money that would change my life, about the protection that might be the only thing keeping me alive now that I'd stumbled into his world, about winter gray eyes that looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. Yes, I whispered. His hand squeezed once, gently, then released. Good. Now finish your dinner. Tomorrow, you start learning how to survive in my world. That night, I lay in a bed too comfortable to trust, staring at ceiling too far away to comprehend, and wondered what the hell I'd gotten myself into. Through the walls, I could hear him moving, pacing, maybe, or working at the desk Marco said he kept in his office. The man who didn't sleep, who wore power like a second skin, who'd looked at me over dinner like I was both salvation and destruction. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something worse. Curious. What made a man like Damian Volkov? What turned someone into the kind of person who could order deaths with a phone call, but serve dinner with careful courtesy? Who built walls around himself so high that simple honesty became currency? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number that I somehow knew was him. Sleep well, Nora. Tomorrow everything changes. I typed back before I could overthink it. It already has. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, good. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, letting exhaustion pull me under. My last thought before sleep claimed me was that cages didn't always have bars. Sometimes they had silk sheets and city views, and men with winter eyes who looked at you like you were the answer to a question they'd been asking for years. And sometimes, God help me, you walked into them willingly. The next 3 weeks blurred into a rhythm I never could have anticipated. Damien was true to his word. He taught me his world with the methodical precision of a surgeon. Every morning began the same way. Breakfast together at 7, where he'd quiz me on faces from photographs, names of people in his organization, the hierarchy that kept his empire running. Afternoons were spent shadowing him to meetings in buildings with no signs, restaurants with back rooms, offices that smelled like cigars and old money. I learned to read a room the way he did, cataloging exits, identifying weapons, noting who deferred to whom and why. I learned that silence was often more valuable than speech, that observation was my greatest asset, and that in his world, trust was earned in millimeters and lost in miles. But I also learned him. The way he took his coffee, black, no sugar, hot enough to burn, how he rubbed his left temple when stressed, always with 2 fingers, always in small circles, that he spoke fluent Italian and Russian, some Mandarin, and could curse creatively in at least 6 languages, that he read actual books with paper pages late into the night when he couldn't sleep, usually philosophy or military history, that he had a scar along his ribs from a knife fight when he was 17, and another on his shoulder from a bullet that had come too close 2 years ago, that he looked at me like I was simultaneously the most frustrating and fascinating thing he'd encountered in years. "You're thinking too much," he said one afternoon, as we sat in the back of the Mercedes, returning from a meeting with a shipping magnate who'd been very careful not to ask what, exactly, was being shipped. "I can hear it from here. I'm trying to understand." I shifted in my seat, hyper-aware of how close we were sitting, how the car's movements occasionally pressed his shoulder against mine. "The man we just met, Giovanni, he's terrified of you. But he also respects you. How do you balance that? Fear and respect aren't opposites." Damien's fingers drummed against his knee, a rare tell of restlessness. Fear keeps people honest. Respect keeps them loyal. Giovanni knows I could destroy him, but he also knows I won't unless he gives me reason. That's the balance. It sounds exhausting. It is. He turned to look at me, and in the car's dim interior, his eyes were more smoke than slate. "That's why I need you. You see things differently. You don't come from this world, so you're not blind to its absurdities. Like the fact that we just spent 2 hours discussing merchandise without anyone saying what the merchandise actually is." His lips quirked. Exactly like that. The car pulled up to the building, and Marco was there immediately to open the door. Over the weeks, I'd learned the names of Damien's inner circle. Marco, the nervous but fiercely loyal nephew who was being groomed for something bigger. Victor, the scarred wall of muscle who served as head of security and had a surprising fondness for classical music. Alexei, the cold-eyed Russian who handled problems and never smiled. And Teresa, the elegant woman in her 50s who managed Damien's legitimate businesses and treated me with careful courtesy that felt like a test I hadn't yet passed. "Boss," Victor called from the lobby entrance, his voice tight. "We have a situation." Damien's entire demeanor changed. Spine straightening, jaw hardening, eyes going flat and dangerous. "What kind of situation?" "Santoro's people. They grabbed one of our shipments at the port. 3 men dead. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Damien's hand found my elbow, his grip firm, but not painful. "Marco, take Nora upstairs. Now, I can help." I started, but the look he shot me killed the words in my throat. "Upstairs. This doesn't concern you." It was the first time he'd dismissed me like that. Like I was something to be protected rather than trusted. The sting of it surprised me with its intensity. Marco guided me to the elevator, his expression apologetic. "He's just worried about you," he said quietly as the doors closed. "When things get violent, he doesn't want you anywhere near it. I signed up for this. I knew what his world involved." Knowing and seeing are different things. The elevator climbed, and Marco's reflection in the polished doors looked older than his years. "The boss, he's trying to keep you separate from the worst of it. He thinks maybe you can stay clean. As if I wasn't already drowning in moral ambiguity, living in luxury paid for by violence I didn't witness but couldn't ignore. The penthouse felt like a gilded tomb when Marco left me there. I paced the living room, watching the sun set over the city, wondering what was happening in whatever room Damien had disappeared into. Were people dying right now because of the situation? Was he ordering executions with the same casual authority he used to order dinner? 3 hours passed, then 4. I tried to read, to study the medical journals I'd been neglecting, but the words swam meaninglessly. Finally, I gave up and opened a bottle of wine from the kitchen, some vintage that probably cost more than my old rent, and poured a glass with shaking hands. The elevator chimed at midnight. Damien stepped out and my breath caught. His shirt was untucked, tie gone, and there was blood on his collar. Not much, just a spray of dark spots that made my medical training kick in before my common sense could catch up. "Are you hurt?" I crossed to him immediately, reaching for his face to check for injuries. He caught my wrist, gently but firmly. "Not my blood." Those 3 words carried more weight than entire conversations. I stared at him. At this man who'd sat across from me at breakfast discussing philosophy, who'd patiently taught me to read body language, who'd made me laugh yesterday with a dry comment about Giovanni's terrible toupee, and saw the violence he'd been shielding me from written in the tired lines around his eyes. "Whose blood?" I whispered. "Does it matter?" He released my wrist, moved past me toward the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, and downed it in one swallow. "The problem's handled. That's all you need to know. Don't do that." Anger flared, unexpected and hot. "Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I've seen blood before, Damien. I've held pressure on gunshot wounds in the ER, watched people die on tables while we tried everything to save them. I'm not some delicate flower who'll wilt at the reality of your world." He slammed the glass down hard enough that I flinched. "You think you understand? You think seeing trauma in a hospital is the same as looking someone in the eye and putting a bullet in their head?" His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. "I'm trying to keep you separate from that. Trying to let you stay Nora Chen, medical student, who saves lives instead of taking them. I'm already not that person anymore." I moved closer, saw him tense like he might retreat. "The moment I signed that contract, the moment I moved into this penthouse, I became complicit. You can't protect me from what I've already chosen." "I can try." "Why?" The question burst out of me, carrying weeks of confusion and tension. "Why does it matter so much? I'm just someone you hired, someone who happened to notice poison in a glass. Why do you care if I stay clean?" He stared at me for a long moment, something warring behind those winter eyes. Then he closed the distance between us in 2 strides, and suddenly his hands were framing my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones with a gentleness that made my heart stutter. "Because everyone in my life is stained," he said, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Everyone is corrupt or broken or has blood on their hands. But you're still good, Nora. You still want to save people. And I'm selfish enough to want to keep something good close to me, even if it means I'll inevitably ruin it." My breath caught. This close, I could see flecks of lighter gray in his irises, could smell cedar and gunpowder, and something uniquely him. His thumb traced my lower lip, and heat flooded through me despite every logical reason to step back. "You won't ruin me," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "I already am." His forehead dropped to rest against mine, his breath warm on my face. "Every day you spend in my world, you lose a little more of what makes you you. And I hate myself for it even as I keep you here. Then let me go." "I can't." The admission sounded like it was torn from somewhere deep. "I should, but I can't. You've become—" He paused, seemed to struggle with the words. "Necessary." Before I could process that, before I could decide if the heat pooling in my stomach was desire or fear, or some dangerous combination of both, his phone buzzed. He pulled back immediately, the vulnerable man disappearing behind walls rebuilt in seconds. "Victor," he answered, his voice back to that cold authority. A pause. "When?" Another pause, longer. "Double the security. No one in or out without my explicit approval." He ended the call, and when he looked at me again, the distance between us felt like miles instead of inches. "What happened?" "Santoro made a move tonight. It failed." He straightened his cuffs, A gesture I'd learned meant he was compartmentalizing, shoving emotions into boxes where they couldn't touch him. But it means war is coming. And when it does, you need to be ready. Ready for what? His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. To see who I really am when I stop trying to be gentle. War came on a Tuesday. I'd been with Damien for 5 weeks when everything fractured. We'd fallen into something that wasn't quite routine but felt dangerously close. Mornings together, days spent learning his empire's machinery. Evenings where the line between professional and personal blurred until I couldn't see it anymore. He hadn't touched me again like he had that night. But the tension stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight, waiting for the snap. It started with Victor bursting into the penthouse at dawn, something he'd never done before. "Boss, we've got a problem. Teresa's been taken." I was already awake, making coffee in the kitchen, and I watched Damien transform. The man who'd been reading beside me on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched, his warmth seeping into my skin, became someone else entirely. Cold, lethal, absolutely focused. When? Where? He was already moving, pulling on the shoulder holster he kept in a drawer, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. 2 hours ago, her apartment. They left this. Victor handed him a phone, and I saw Damien's jaw tighten as he watched whatever video was playing. "Santoro." The name came out like a curse. "He wants to negotiate. It's a trap," Victor said flatly. "Obviously." Damien pocketed the phone, then his eyes found me. "Nora, you're going to the safe house. Marco will take you." "No." I set down my coffee cup, surprised by how steady my hands were. If you're walking into a trap, you need every advantage. You need someone watching who isn't trained to think like you do, who'll see things your men might miss. Absolutely not. You said my instincts saved your life once. Trust them to do it again. I moved closer, saw the war in his expression, the desire to protect me battling against the acknowledgement that I was right. "I'm not asking to hold a gun or negotiate. I'm asking to observe. That's what you hired me for." The muscle in his jaw jumped. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Would have Marco drag me to safety while he walked into danger alone. Then he exhaled slowly, and I saw the moment he surrendered. "You stay with me. Always within arm's reach. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Understood. 20 minutes later, we were in the Mercedes with Victor driving, and Alexei in the passenger seat, both men carrying enough weaponry to start a small war. The meeting point was a warehouse on the docks. Cliché enough to be insulting, Damien muttered, which meant Santoro was either stupid or supremely confident. "Tell me about him," I said quietly, as we drove through pre-dawn streets. "Santoro?" Damien's hand rested on my knee, a gesture that should have been possessive, but felt protective. "Old family. Thinks he's entitled to territory he hasn't earned. His father and mine had an understanding. Stay out of each other's way, but the son's ambitious and stupid. A dangerous combination. And Teresa?" His fingers tightened. "She's been with me since the beginning. Helped me build the legitimate side of the business. Kept me honest when I could have gone completely dark. If he's hurt her." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The warehouse loomed ahead, rusted and forgotten except for the expensive cars parked outside. 6 of them, which meant Santoro had brought at least a dozen men. We had Victor, Alexei, Marco, and 3 others whose names I'd learned but whose eyes still made me nervous. Damien cupped my face before we exited the car, forcing me to meet his gaze. "Stay behind me. Watch everything. If you see anything wrong, anything, you tell me immediately." I nodded, and he pressed his forehead to mine for just a second. A gesture that felt like goodbye. Inside, the warehouse was exactly what I expected. Concrete floors, exposed beams, the smell of rust and river water. Santoro waited in the center with his men fanned out behind him, and Teresa knelt at his feet, hands bound, face bruised but eyes blazing with fury. Volkov. Santoro was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with slicked hair and a suit that tried too hard. "So glad you could join us. Let her go." Damien's voice was arctic. "This is between us. Everything is between us now." Santoro smiled, and it was the smile of someone who thought they held all the cards. "You've had free reign in this city for too long. Time for a regime change." I watched as Damien's men positioned themselves, as Santoro's people did the same. A chess game with human pieces, everyone waiting for the first move. But my eyes caught something else. One of Santoro's men, standing slightly apart from the others, kept glancing at the rafters. Up, then down, then up again. My heart stopped. "Damien," I whispered, pressing close to his back. "Snipers. In the rafters." I felt him go rigid. His hand found mine behind his back. Squeezed once, acknowledgement and gratitude rolled into a single gesture. "Interesting negotiation tactic, Santoro," Damien said, his voice unchanged despite the revelation. "Snipers in the rafters. Should I assume you're not actually interested in talking?" Santoro's smile faltered. "I don't know what." "Northeast corner by the broken window. Southwest behind the support beam. Probably at least 2 more I can't see from this angle." Damien took a step forward, and I felt Victor move to stay between me and the nearest threat. "So let's stop pretending this is about negotiation. You want war? Say it clearly." The warehouse held its breath. Then Teresa moved, faster than anyone anticipated, twisting against her bonds and rolling away from Santoro, and everything exploded. Gunfire erupted from above. Victor shoved me behind a steel pillar as Damien's men returned fire, the warehouse transforming into chaos and thunder. I pressed myself against the concrete, hands over my ears, medical training screaming at me to help but survival instinct keeping me frozen. Through the noise, I saw Damien moving, not running, not hiding, but advancing. Each step was calculated, his weapon raised, and I watched him drop 2 of Santoro's men with precision that should have terrified me. Maybe it did, but it also held a terrible beauty, the efficiency of violence perfected. Victor dragged Teresa to safety beside me, cutting her bonds with a knife that appeared from nowhere. She was bleeding from her temple, breathing hard, but her eyes were clear. "Stay down," she ordered me, and I noticed she'd somehow acquired a gun. "When this is over, you're going to have questions. Save them." A body fell from the rafters, one of the snipers, taken out by Alexei's methodical shooting. Then another. The tide was turning, Damien's superior training and positioning overwhelming Santoro's numbers. I saw it happen in slow motion. Santoro, seeing his plan crumbling, pulled a backup weapon. Not aimed at Damien, at me. The gun rose, his finger on the trigger, and I realized with crystal clarity that I was about to die. Then Damien was there, stepping between us, his body a shield I hadn't asked for. The shot went wide. Damien's return fire didn't. Santoro dropped, a red bloom spreading across his chest, and the warehouse went silent, except for ringing ears and harsh breathing. "Clear," Victor called after what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. Damien turned to me, his hands immediately on my face, my shoulders, checking for injuries with barely controlled panic. "Are you hurt? Nora, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." My voice shook. "You stepped in front of a bullet. You could have died. Better me than you." He said it like it was obvious, like his life wasn't infinitely more valuable than mine. "I told you, I don't share what's mine. That includes letting bullets touch you." Despite everything, the bodies, the blood, the violence still echoing in my bones, I almost laughed. "You're insane." "Probably." He pulled me against his chest, and I felt his heart hammering despite his calm exterior. "But I'm insane, and you're alive, so I'm calling it a win." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Victor was already coordinating cleanup, making calls that would ensure this warehouse would be sanitized before any authorities arrived. In Damien's world, even war had bureaucracy. Teresa appeared beside us, pressing a cloth to her bleeding temple. "The girl's got good eyes, boss. Saved all our asses." She looked at me with something like respect. "You're tougher than you look." "I'm really not," I said honestly. "Yeah, you are." Damien's arms tightened around me. "You didn't run. You didn't panic. You saw what needed to be seen and you told me." He pulled back enough to look at me, and his eyes were molten silver. "That's the definition of tough, Nora." The days after were a blur of debriefings and damage control. Santoro's organization crumbled without its head, absorbed into Damien's empire or scattered to other cities. Teresa recovered, earning her a week of Damien hovering like an anxious mother hen, which she endured with exasperated grace. And I tried to process what I'd witnessed, what I'd survived. But mostly I tried to understand what I'd felt when Damien had stepped in front of that bullet. Terror. Yes. But also something deeper, something I'd been avoiding for weeks. It came to a head one night, 2 weeks after the warehouse, when I found him on the balcony at 3 a.m. He stood at the railing, hands gripping the metal, shoulders tense beneath his shirt. "Can't sleep?" I asked, stepping out into the cool night air. "Never could." He didn't turn around. "You should be resting. You've been having nightmares." I had been. Replaying the warehouse, the gunfire, the moment that bullet had come for me, but that wasn't what kept me awake tonight. "Why did you do it?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "Step in front of me like that. You could have died. I told you." "No." I moved closer, until I stood beside him at the railing. "Don't give me the line about protecting what's yours. Tell me the truth." The silence stretched. Below us, the city never slept. A living thing of light and shadow that didn't care about the dramas playing out in its towers. "Because somewhere in the last 5 weeks, you stopped being my employee," he said finally, his voice rough. "You became the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I see before I close my eyes. You became the reason I come home instead of sleeping at the office, the reason I try to be better than what my father made me." He turned to face me, and his expression was raw, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "Because I'm halfway in love with you, Nora Chen, and I don't know what to do about it." My breath caught. "Damien, I know it's impossible. I know I'm not what you need, that my world is toxic and violent, and will probably destroy everything good about you. I know I should let you finish the contract and walk away with your money and your freedom and never look back." His hand came up, cupped my cheek with devastating gentleness. "But I'm selfish, and I'm dangerous, and I want you anyway. I should have been smart, should have remembered all the reasons this was a terrible idea. The violence, the danger, the impossibility of building anything real in a world built on blood and fear. Should have protected my heart the way he tried to protect my life. Instead, I kissed him. It was desperate and messy and everything I'd been denying for weeks. His arms came around me like I was the only thing keeping him upright, and he kissed me back with the intensity of a man who'd been holding back too long. I tasted whiskey and want, felt the slight tremor in his hands as they tangled in my hair, and understood that I'd been lying to myself about what I felt. "This is crazy," I gasped when we broke apart, completely. He rested his forehead against mine, breathing hard. "Say yes anyway." "Yes to what?" "To staying, after the 6 months. To being mine in every way that matters. To building something real in the middle of all this chaos." His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized I was crying. "I can't promise you safe, Nora. I can't promise you easy. But I can promise you that I will protect you with everything I have, that I will never lie to you, that I will love you with the same intensity I've lived my entire life. Completely, obsessively, without reservation. That's terrifying. I know." He smiled, and it was soft and real, and mine. "But you're brave. You've proven that 100 times over." I thought about the girl I'd been 6 weeks ago. Invisible, exhausted, drowning in debt and invisibility. That girl would have run from this, would have seen the danger and nothing else. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I'd been forged in gunfire and tension, had learned to read violence the way others read books, had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. And I'd fallen for a man who was equal parts threat and salvation, whose darkness should have repelled me but somehow made me feel more alive than I'd ever been. "Yes," I whispered. "To all of it. To staying. To you." His kiss was softer this time, a promise instead of a plea. When he pulled back, his eyes held the kind of warmth I'd never thought I'd see there. Hope, maybe, or joy. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not." I smiled against his mouth. "But you're stuck with me anyway. 6 months became a year, became forever. I finished medical school remotely, graduated with honors, and opened a clinic in one of the neighborhoods Damien controlled, providing healthcare to people who couldn't afford it otherwise. It became my way of balancing the scales, of staying Nora Chen even while becoming Nora Volkov, because yes, eventually, I married him. In a small ceremony with only his inner circle present, Teresa beaming like a proud mother, Victor crying actual tears he denied later, and Marco serving as best man while trying not to look terrified. Damien wore all black naturally, and I wore midnight blue, the color of the first dress he'd bought me, the one that started everything. The violence didn't stop. His world remained dangerous, remained morally complicated, remained impossible to explain to the few old friends I had left. But we built something real anyway. A partnership where my healing balanced his hurt, where my light illuminated his shadows without extinguishing them. He never stopped protecting me with that fierce possessiveness that should have felt like a cage but somehow felt like wings. And I never stopped seeing the details others missed. Kept him safe the way he kept me whole. Some nights, when sleep eluded us both, we'd stand on that balcony where everything changed, and he'd hold me like I was something precious. Like I was the thing that made his empire mean something beyond power and territory. "Do you regret it?" he asked me once, a year into our marriage. Saying yes to all of this, I thought about the warehouse, the gunfire, the moment he'd stepped between me and death without hesitation. Thought about every complicated, dangerous, beautiful moment that came after. "Not even for a second," I said, and meant it, because some prisons you walk into willingly. Some cages have doors that open from the inside. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is trust that love. Messy, complicated, absolutely imperfect love is worth the risk. He kissed my temple, and I felt him smile against my skin. "Neither do I, Nora Chen," he whispered. "Neither do I." And in a city that never slept, in a penthouse that had transformed from gilded cage to home, we stood together, the Mafia boss and the waitress who'd saved his life, who'd somehow saved each other, and watched the dawn break over our impossible, perfect, dangerous life.